The night air on Karvoth Prime was cold and smelled of smoke. Kate Morrison sat with her back against the rough wooden fence, her wrists bound in heavy metal chains that cut into her skin. She could hear the sounds of the alien war camp all around her, voices speaking in harsh, clicking languages she did not understand, the crackle of fires, the sharpening of weapons against stone. 3 days ago, Kate had been working in the engine room of the colony ship Defiance when the attack came. She remembered the alarms, the screaming, the way the ship shuddered and broke apart as the Draxian warships tore through their shields. She remembered running through corridors filled with smoke, trying to reach the escape pods. She remembered the moment the floor gave way beneath her feet, and she fell into darkness. When she woke up, she was in a cage with 12 other survivors. The Draxians had sorted through them like cattle, separating the strong from the weak. The soldiers were taken away first. Then the doctors and scientists. Kate and a few others were left behind, deemed worthless by their captors. For 2 days they sat in that cage, watching as more prisoners were brought in and taken away. No one told them what would happen next. On the 3rd day, a group of Draxian scouts came to the cage. They were younger than the other warriors, their armor less decorated. They spoke among themselves in their clicking language and laughed, a sound that made Kate's stomach turn. One of them pointed at her. The others nodded, and their laughter grew louder. They opened the cage and dragged Kate out while the other prisoners watched in silence. The scouts took her through the camp as the sun was setting. Kate saw hundreds of Draxian warriors preparing for battle, cleaning weapons, eating strange foods, engaging in combat practice. The aliens were massive, easily 7 feet tall, with thick gray skin covered in natural armor plates. Their faces were angular with 4 eyes arranged in a square pattern and mouths full of sharp teeth. They looked at Kate as she was dragged past but showed no interest, as if she were nothing more than a piece of trash being carried to the dump. At the center of the camp stood a large tent, bigger than all the others, made from dark leather and decorated with bones and strips of colored fabric. A fence made of sharpened wooden stakes surrounded it. The scouts stopped at this fence, and one of them pulled out the chains. They wrapped the chains around Kate's wrists and attached them to the fence posts, leaving her kneeling in the dirt. They stood back and looked at their work, clicking and laughing among themselves. One of them said something that made the others laugh even harder. Then they walked away, leaving Kate alone in the growing darkness. Kate pulled at the chains, but they would not budge. The metal was strong, and the fence posts were driven deep into the ground. She looked around desperately, but there was no one to help her. The other Draxian warriors in the camp went about their business, ignoring her completely. She realized with a sinking feeling that this was intentional. She had been placed here for a reason, though she did not understand what that reason was. As the night grew darker and colder, Kate's mind raced through possibilities. Perhaps this was some kind of execution method, leaving prisoners to freeze or starve. Perhaps wild animals would come in the night. Perhaps the tent behind her housed some kind of war beast that would be released to kill her. She thought about her family back on Earth, about her mother and her younger brother. They would never know what happened to her. They would wait for messages that would never come. The sounds of the camp gradually quieted as the warriors settled in for the night. Fires burned low. Voices faded. Kate was left in near silence, broken only by the occasional sound of movement from inside the large tent behind her. Someone was in there, someone important enough to have the biggest tent in the center of the camp. She wondered if that person knew she was chained to their fence, if they cared, if they had ordered it done. Hours passed. Kate's legs went numb from kneeling. Her wrists bled where the chains cut into them. She tried to stay quiet, but eventually the pain and fear became too much and she began to cry, soft sobs that she tried to muffle against her shoulder. She did not want to give her captors the satisfaction of hearing her break, but she could not help it. She was going to die here, alone, far from home, and there was nothing she could do about it. Somewhere in the camp, a warrior began to sing, a low rumbling sound that others joined. It was not beautiful by human standards, but there was something haunting about it, something that spoke of loss and distance and longing for home. Kate listened and realized that perhaps these aliens were not so different from humans after all. They too were far from where they belonged. They too sang sad songs in the night. When the singing ended, silence fell again. Kate's tears dried on her face. She was too tired and cold to cry anymore. She leaned back against the fence and looked up at the unfamiliar stars above Karvoth Prime. She tried to find patterns in them, tried to remember the constellations her father had taught her when she was young. But these stars were all wrong. She was in a different part of the galaxy now, too far from Earth for those old patterns to exist. The night seemed to last forever. Kate drifted in and out of consciousness, her body shutting down from exhaustion and shock. In her dreams, she was back on the Defiance, back in the engine room where everything made sense, where she understood how things worked and could fix them with her hands and her tools. In her dreams, she was safe. But then the dreams faded and she was back in the cold dirt, chained to the fence, waiting for dawn. She heard movement from inside the tent. Someone was waking up. Kate's heart began to pound. This was it. Whatever was going to happen to her would happen soon. She closed her eyes and tried to prepare herself for death, but found that she could not. Some stubborn part of her refused to give up. Some part of her wanted to live, wanted to fight, wanted to survive no matter what came next. The tent flap opened and heavy footsteps approached the fence. The Draxian who emerged from the tent was the largest warrior Kate had seen yet. He stood nearly 8 feet tall with armor plates that looked thicker and darker than the others, marked with scars from countless battles. His 4 eyes fixed on Kate with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. If she was going to die, she would not die cowering. The Warchief walked around her slowly, examining her the way someone might examine a strange insect. His footsteps were heavy and deliberate. Kate could smell something like copper and earth coming from him. He stopped in front of her and tilted his head, studying her face. Then he made a clicking sound deep in his throat that might have been surprise or curiosity. Other warriors began to emerge from their tents as the sun rose higher. They gathered around the fence, forming a loose circle. Kate could hear them talking among themselves, their voices excited. Some of them were laughing. She understood that this was entertainment for them, watching what their Warchief would do to the human chained to his fence. She understood that her death was meant to be a spectacle. The Warchief raised one massive hand and the crowd fell silent immediately. He spoke in his own language, his voice deep and commanding. The words meant nothing to Kate, but she could hear the authority in them. He gestured at her and then at the fence. Some of the warriors in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a younger scout Kate recognized from the night before, stepped forward and spoke quickly, defensively. The Warchief's eyes narrowed and he responded with what could only be anger in his voice. The scout backed away, his head lowered in submission. The Warchief turned back to Kate and crouched down so his face was level with hers. Up close, she could see that his eyes were not solid black like she had thought, but had flecks of gold in them. He studied her for a long moment and then spoke in halting, heavily accented English. What you do?" he asked. Kate was so surprised to hear her own language that it took her a moment to respond. Her voice came out rough and dry. "I'm an engineer," she said. The Warchief's face showed confusion. He did not know the word. "I build things," Kate clarified. "I fix machines. I was not a soldier." The Warchief looked at her hands, still bound in chains. He reached out and took one of her hands in his, turning it over to examine her palms. His touch was surprisingly gentle for someone so large. He ran a thick finger over the calluses and scars that marked her as someone who worked with tools. "Builder," he said, the word strange in his mouth. "Not fighter." "No," Kate agreed. "Not a fighter." The Warchief stood up and turned to address the crowd of warriors. He spoke for several minutes in his own language, his voice carrying across the camp. Kate could not understand the words, but she could see the reaction they caused. Some warriors nodded in agreement. Others looked angry or confused. The young scouts who had chained her here looked terrified. When the Warchief finished speaking, he drew a large blade from his belt. Kate's breath caught in her throat. This was it. She closed her eyes and waited for the strike. But instead of the bite of metal, she felt the chains around her wrists fall away. She opened her eyes to see the Warchief sheathing his blade. He had cut through the chains as easily as cutting paper. The Warchief reached down and pulled Kate to her feet. Her legs nearly gave out after kneeling all night, but he steadied her with a hand on her shoulder. "I am Krathok," he said in his broken English. "You are now under my protection. You understand?" Kate nodded, not trusting her voice. "Any warrior who touches you will answer to me," Krathok continued, raising his voice so the entire camp could hear. "This human is not enemy. This human is builder, not fighter. To harm one who cannot fight is no honor. It is shame." He said something else in his own language, and several warriors hurried forward. They brought water and what looked like dried meat. Krathok gestured for Kate to take it. "You eat. You drink." Then we talk more, he said. Kate took the offerings with shaking hands. The water was warm and tasted strange, but she drank it gratefully. The meat was tough and had a bitter flavor, but she forced herself to eat it. She had not had food or water since her capture, and her body needed it desperately. Krathok watched her eat and then spoke again. I make vow to you, human Kate. You will not go back to what my people planned for prisoners. You will not be treated as less than warrior. You have my word, and my word is law in this camp. Kate swallowed the last of the meat and looked up at him. Why? She asked. Why are you doing this? Krathok was quiet for a moment, as if considering how to explain in a language he barely knew. My scouts, they left you at my fence as insult, he finally said. They think I am too strict with honor code. They think it is funny to leave weak human for me to kill, but they do not understand honor. Honor is not about killing weak. Honor is about protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Honor is about strength used for right purpose. He gestured at the camp around them. My people are warriors, strong warriors. But strength without wisdom is just violence. I have seen too much violence in this war. Too much death for no reason. You are builder, not fighter. There is no honor in your death. Kate felt tears starting to form again, but for a different reason now. She had expected to die. She had accepted it. Now this alien warchief, this massive warrior who should have been her enemy, was offering her protection and speaking of honor and wisdom. What happens now? She asked. Krathok pointed to a small tent at the edge of the camp. You stay there. You are free to move in camp, but not to leave. If you need something, you ask me. Other warriors will not bother you. I have given my word. Maybe later we find a way to return you to your people. But for now you are safe here. He started to walk away, but Kate called after him. Krathok, she said, and he turned back. Thank you. The warchief's face was hard to read, but something in his eyes softened slightly. Thank me by staying alive, human Kate. I have given my vow. Do not make me regret it. Then he walked back to his tent, leaving Kate standing by the fence surrounded by curious and confused Draxian warriors. One of them, an older female with intricate markings on her armor, approached and gestured for Kate to follow. She led Kate to the small tent Krathok had indicated, speaking in gentle clicks that might have been meant as comfort even though Kate could not understand them. The tent was simple but clean, with a pile of furs for sleeping and a container of water. It was more than Kate had dared hope for just hours ago when she thought she would be dead by morning. She sat down on the furs and her body finally allowed itself to relax. The fear and tension that had kept her rigid all night melted away, and exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. As she lay down and closed her eyes, Kate thought about the warchief's words. He had made a vow. In her experience, people rarely kept their promises, especially to enemies. But something in Krathok's voice had been different. Something told her that this alien warrior took his vow seriously. For the first time since the Defiance was destroyed, Kate allowed herself to feel a small spark of hope. The first week in the Draxian war camp was the strangest time of Kate's life. She woke each morning expecting to find that Krathok's protection had been a dream, that she would be dragged from her tent and executed. But each morning she woke safe and undisturbed, and slowly she began to believe that the warchief's vow was real. The warriors kept their distance from her, though she often caught them staring. Some looked curious, others hostile, but none approached or threatened her. Krathok had made his command clear and none dared to disobey. The female warrior who had led her to the tent on that first day brought her food twice a day, always the same dried meat and warm water, along with some kind of bitter vegetable that Kate learned to tolerate if not enjoy. Kate spent her days observing the camp, partly out of boredom and partly because her engineer's mind could not help but analyze everything she saw. The Draxians were organized and disciplined, but their technology was strange to her eyes. They had advanced weapons and armor, but their basic infrastructure seemed almost primitive. Their water system was particularly inefficient, relying on a series of manual pumps that warriors had to operate in shifts. She watched them struggle with maintenance on their equipment, using brute force where a more delicate touch would have been better. She saw them waste materials and time on repairs that could have been done more simply. It frustrated her to see such obvious problems going unsolved, but she kept quiet. She was a prisoner, even if a protected one, and it was not her place to offer advice. On the 8th day, Kate was sitting outside her tent watching the morning routine of the camp when she heard a loud cracking sound followed by shouts of alarm. Warriors were gathering near the center of camp where the main water pump stood. She could see water spraying from a broken pipe, flooding the ground. The warriors were trying to stop the flow, but the pressure was too strong. Kate stood up and walked closer, staying at the edge of the crowd. She could see the problem immediately. The pump housing had cracked under pressure and the release valve was stuck closed. The warriors were trying to force the valve open with tools, but they were only making it worse. If they kept going, the entire pump would rupture and the camp would lose its water supply for days while they waited for replacement parts. She hesitated, uncertain if she should involve herself. But then she saw one warrior strike the valve housing hard with a hammer, and she knew that if someone did not stop them soon, the damage would be beyond repair. She pushed her way through the crowd, ignoring the surprised looks from the warriors. "Stop," she called out. "You're making it worse." The warriors turned to stare at her. One of them, a massive male with a scarred face, growled something in Draxian and raised his hammer threateningly. But before he could do anything, Krathok's voice rang out across the camp. "Let her through." The Warchief pushed through the crowd and stopped beside Kate. He looked at the broken pump and then at her. "You know how to fix?" he asked. Kate nodded. "I think so. But I need tools and everyone needs to step back so I can see what I'm working with." Krathok gave orders in Draxian and the warriors backed away, giving Kate space. He gestured for her to proceed. Kate approached the pump carefully, examining the damage. The crack in the housing was worse than she had thought, but the valve mechanism itself was still intact. If she could release the pressure slowly and patch the crack temporarily, the pump could keep functioning until a proper repair could be made. "I need something to seal the crack," she said. "Some kind of paste or resin, and I need a smaller tool to release the valve, not a hammer." Krathok spoke to the warriors and they scattered to find what she needed. Within minutes, Kate had a bowl of thick paste that smelled awful, but had the right consistency, and a set of smaller tools that would work. She set to work, her hands moving with practiced confidence. First, she carefully released the stuck valve using gentle pressure and leverage instead of force. Water stopped spraying and the pressure in the system dropped to safe levels. Then she cleaned the crack in the housing and applied the paste, working it deep into the fracture. The material hardened quickly in contact with air, forming a temporary seal that would hold for weeks if not months. The entire repair took less than an hour. When Kate stepped back, the pump was running smoothly again, water flowing at the correct pressure with no leaks. The gathered warriors were silent, staring at her with expressions she could not read. Krathok examined her work, and then looked at her with what might have been respect in his 4 eyes. "Good work," he said simply. Over the following days, word spread through the camp about Kate's repair of the water pump. Warriors who had ignored her before now watched her with curiosity. Some even nodded at her when she passed, a small gesture but meaningful. The female warrior who brought her food began to linger, trying to communicate in broken gestures and simple words. Kate learned that the female's name was Rek, and that she was one of the camp's senior warriors, despite looking younger than Krathok. Vrek seemed fascinated by Kate's hands, by how small and precise they were compared to a Draxian's large fingers. She showed Kate her own hands, scarred from battle, and made a gesture that seemed to indicate respect for different kinds of strength. Krathok began calling Kate to his tent in the evenings. At first she was nervous about these meetings, but she quickly learned that the Warchief simply wanted to talk. His English was improving, and he seemed genuinely interested in learning about humans and their ways. He asked her about Earth, about human culture, about what had brought her people to Karvoth Prime. Kate found herself answering honestly, even though she knew she was talking to her enemy. She told him about the colony mission, about how Earth was running out of room and resources, about how humanity had been searching for new worlds to settle. She told him about her family, about her life before the war. In return, Krathok told her about the Draxians. He explained that his people were not from this part of space originally, that they had been driven from their home worlds by a terrible enemy. He spoke of the Draxian honor code, of how warriors were expected to protect the weak and fight with dignity. He explained that the invasion of human colonies was not cruelty but desperation. His people needed new worlds to survive. "We are not monsters," Krathok said one evening as they sat by the fire outside his tent. "We do what we must to keep our people alive, just as you would do for yours." Kate wanted to argue, to point out the destruction and death his people had caused, but she found that she could not. She understood desperation. She understood survival. If Earth had been under threat, would humans have done any different? There has to be another way, she said instead. There has to be a solution that doesn't involve war. Krathok looked at her with his golden-flecked eyes, and something like sadness crossed his face. Perhaps, he said, but I'm only one warchief. I cannot stop a war that has already begun. 2 weeks after Kate's arrival in the camp, another problem arose. Several warriors fell ill with some kind of infection, their wounds not healing properly. The camp's medical supplies were running low, and the healer did not know what to do. Kate examined the wounds and recognized the signs of bacterial infection. She knew that proper sterilization and antibiotics would help, but the Draxians had neither. She spent a day experimenting with the local plants and materials, using her knowledge of chemistry and biology to create a basic antiseptic solution. It was crude compared to human medicine, but when she applied it to the infected wounds, they began to improve within hours. The healer, an old male named Grok, watched her work with intense interest and began asking questions through Krathok's translation. By the end of her 3rd week in the camp, Kate had repaired 5 more broken systems, improved the efficiency of the cooking fires, and taught Grok how to make her antiseptic solution. She was no longer just a prisoner under protection. She had become useful, valuable even. The warriors no longer stared at her with hostility, but with something closer to curiosity and grudging respect. Krathok noticed the change and spoke to her about it one evening. My warriors are learning that humans have worth beyond fighting, he said. This is good. Perhaps there is hope for peace after all. Kate wanted to share his optimism, but she knew the war was far from over, and that one small camp's acceptance did not change the larger conflict. Still, it was a start. The messenger arrived on a cold morning, 4 weeks after Kate had been chained to Krathok's fence. She was outside her tent, helping Rek repair a damaged blade, when she heard the sound of heavy footsteps approaching the camp. 3 Draxian warriors in ornate armor rode massive beasts that looked like a cross between a lizard and a horse. The camp fell silent as they entered, and everyone stood at attention. Krathok emerged from his tent and greeted the newcomers with formal clicks and gestures. Kate watched from a distance, sensing that something important was happening. The lead messenger handed Krathok a metal tablet covered in carved symbols. The warchief read it slowly, his face growing darker with each line. After the messengers departed, Krathok called for an assembly of all senior warriors. Kate was not invited, but she could hear raised voices coming from the warchief's tent. The meeting lasted for hours, and when it finally ended, the warriors who emerged looked troubled. Frek found Kate and led her quickly to her tent, gesturing that she should stay inside. That evening, Krathok came to her tent. He looked tired and angry in a way Kate had not seen before. The High Command has learned of your presence here, he said without greeting. They have sent orders that you are to be handed over for interrogation and execution. They say I have broken our laws by keeping a human prisoner alive and free. Kate felt her stomach drop. She had known this peace could not last forever, but she had allowed herself to hope. What are you going to do? She asked, though she was afraid of the answer. Krathok sat down heavily on the ground, a gesture of informality that surprised her. He looked old suddenly, worn down by too many decisions and too much responsibility. I could refuse the order, he said, but that would make me a traitor, and they would come here with an army to take you by force. My warriors would die defending a human, which goes against everything our people believe. Or I could send you to them and let them do what they will. Or, Kate prompted, hearing something in his voice that suggested another option. Or, Krathok continued, I convince the High Command that you are worth more alive than dead, that you possess knowledge and skills that can benefit our people. Kate understood immediately what he was suggesting. You want me to help you win the war? Krathok met her eyes directly. My people are preparing a major assault on the last human stronghold in this region. It is a fortress called Bunker 7, heavily defended. We have siege equipment, but it keeps failing. Our engineers cannot solve the problems. If you could fix these machines, make them work properly, I could prove to the High Command that a living human engineer is more valuable than a dead prisoner. Kate stood up and paced the small tent, her mind racing. The choice before her was impossible. help the enemy destroy the last refuge of her people, or be handed over to certain death. But even as she considered it, she knew there was a third option, one that was dangerous but might be the only way. "If I do this," she said slowly, "if I help you with your siege equipment, will you guarantee the safety of the civilians in Bunker 7? The people inside are not all soldiers. There are families, children, people like me who cannot fight." Krathok considered this. "I cannot promise they will not be taken prisoner," he said, "but I can vow that no civilians will be killed if they surrender. I can order my warriors to show mercy to the defenseless." It was not enough, but it was something. Kate made her decision. "I'll do it," she said. "I'll fix your siege equipment. But I want your word, your personal vow, that you will protect the civilians." "You have it," Krathok said, and Kate believed him. The next morning, Kate was taken to the far end of the camp where the siege equipment was assembled. She had expected catapults or battering rams, but what she found was far more advanced. The Draxians had massive mobile artillery platforms, mechanized towers, and energy shields. The technology was impressive, but the execution was flawed. Everywhere she looked, she saw the same problems: poor calibration, faulty connections, and components that were not designed to work together. She spent 3 days examining the equipment, taking notes and asking questions through Krathok's translation. The Draxian engineers were suspicious of her at first, but gradually accepted her presence as she identified problems they had been struggling with for weeks. By the 4th day, Kate had a complete understanding of what needed to be done. She worked for 12 days straight, barely sleeping, eating while she modified circuits and recalibrated systems. Her hands became covered in burns and cuts from the unfamiliar technology, but she pushed through. Krathok watched her work sometimes, though he said little. Kate wondered if he knew what she was planning, if he could see the subtle modifications she was making that would serve a dual purpose. The siege equipment worked perfectly when she was done. The artillery platforms fired with precision, the towers moved smoothly, and the shields held strong. The Draxian engineers tested everything thoroughly and declared it ready for battle. Krathok was pleased and sent word to the High Command that his human engineer had proven her worth. But Kate had built in a secret. Deep in the primary power distribution system, she had installed a failsafe that would trigger after exactly 2 hours of sustained operation. The equipment would not break down catastrophically, that would be too obvious. Instead, it would develop a temporary power fluctuation that would drop the shields and slow the artillery for approximately 10 minutes. 10 minutes would not be enough to stop the assault, but it might be enough to give the defenders inside Bunker 7 a chance to mount a counterattack or evacuate civilians. She knew this betrayal would likely cost her life, but she had accepted that. She could not live with herself if she simply handed victory to the enemy without giving her people any chance at all. The assault was scheduled for 3 days later. In that time, Krathok was busy with preparations, and Kate saw him only briefly. She spent her time in her tent thinking about her family on Earth and wondering if they knew she was still alive. She thought about the people in Bunker 7, strangers she had never met but who depended on her giving them a fighting chance. On the night before the assault, Vrek came to Kate's tent with food and water. The female warrior sat with her in silence for a while, then reached out and took Kate's hand. She said something in Draxian, her voice gentle. Kate did not understand the words, but she understood the meaning. Vrek knew something bad was going to happen. Maybe all the warriors sensed it. The morning of the assault came gray and cold. Kate was placed in an observation post with Krathok and his senior commanders, far enough from the battle to be safe, but close enough to see what happened. She watched as the Draxian forces moved into position around Bunker 7, thousands of warriors supported by the siege equipment she had repaired. The attack began at dawn. The artillery platforms fired on the fortress walls while the towers advanced under the cover of energy shields. For the first hour, everything went according to plan. The defenders fought back desperately, but the Draxian equipment was working flawlessly. Kate watched and felt sick, knowing that every minute brought her people closer to defeat. Then, at exactly 2 hours as she had designed it, the power fluctuation hit. The energy shields flickered and dropped. The artillery platforms slowed their fire. It lasted for less than 10 minutes, but in that window, the defenders of Bunker 7 launched their counterattack. They emerged from hidden positions and hit the Draxian forces hard with concentrated fire. Several siege towers were destroyed and many warriors fell. Beside her, Kate heard Krathok roar in anger. Orders were shouted and the Draxian forces regrouped, but the momentum of the assault had been broken. The shields came back up and the artillery resumed firing, but now the defenders knew they could be beaten. The battle turned into a grinding stalemate. Kate felt hands grab her arms roughly. Two warriors pulled her to her feet and Krathok turned to face her, his four eyes blazing with fury. "What did you do?" he demanded. Kate met his gaze without flinching. "I did what I had to do," she said. "I could not betray my own people, even to save myself. I knew you would figure it out, and I accepted the consequences." Krathok stared at her for a long moment, and Kate prepared herself for death. Around them, the other Draxian commanders were calling for her immediate execution. But then Krathok did something unexpected. He began to laugh, a deep rumbling sound that silenced everyone. Krathok's laughter echoed across the command post, confusing his warriors and terrifying Kate. She did not understand what he found funny about her betrayal. The commanders around them shifted uncomfortably, waiting for their Warchief to give the order for her execution. But instead of anger, Krathok's face showed something that looked almost like satisfaction. "You stayed loyal to your people even when facing death," he said, still holding her gaze. "You chose honor over survival. Do you understand what this means in Draxian culture?" Kate shook her head, too stunned to speak. "It means you acted with the highest virtue a warrior can possess," Krathok explained. "Loyalty to one's people above all else is the foundation of our honor code. You have proven yourself worthy of respect even as my enemy." One of the commanders, a scarred male named Throck, stepped forward and snarled something in Draxian. Krathok turned to him and responded sharply. The two argued back and forth, their voices rising. Kate could not understand the words, but she could see that Throck wanted her dead and Krathok was refusing. Finally, Krathok raised his hand and silence fell. He spoke to his assembled commanders in a formal tone that carried absolute authority. When he finished, several warriors bowed their heads in acceptance, though Throck and a few others still looked mutinous. Krathok turned back to Kate. "They want your blood for the warriors who died in your betrayal," he said. "And by our laws they have the right to demand it. But I have invoked an ancient custom. I am offering you a choice, human Kate." He gestured toward the battlefield where fighting still raged around Bunker 7. "I will send a message to your people in that fortress. I will tell them that I am willing to release all civilian prisoners I currently hold, and I will guarantee safe passage for all civilians inside Bunker 7 if they wish to evacuate. In exchange, you will give me your word of honor that you will work for me truthfully and without sabotage. You will use your skills to help my people, not harm them." Kate felt the weight of that offer settle on her shoulders. He was asking her to choose between saving innocent lives and maintaining her opposition to the enemy. "And if I refuse?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Then you die here and now, and the assault continues until Bunker 7 falls. Every person inside, fighter and civilian alike, will become a prisoner or die in the battle. Your betrayal will have accomplished nothing except adding to the death count." It was not really a choice at all. Kate thought about the families inside Bunker 7, about the children who did not deserve to die in this war. She thought about the prisoners Krathok held, who might see their freedom. Saving those lives was worth more than her pride or her desire to fight. "I give you my word," she said quietly. "I will help you truthfully without sabotage. But only if you keep your promise about the civilians." Krathok nodded once. "You have my vow. I will send the message immediately." He gave orders to a runner who sprinted away toward the communication equipment. Then he turned back to his commanders and spoke again in Draxian, his tone brooking no argument. One by one, the commanders signaled their acceptance, even Throck, though his four eyes burned with resentment. Kate was taken back to her tent under heavy guard. The fighting continued through the rest of that day, but by evening word came that the defenders of Bunker 7 had agreed to a ceasefire to discuss terms. Krathok went to negotiate personally, and he took Kate with him. They approached the fortress under a white flag, accompanied by only 2 guards. The gates opened partially and 3 humans emerged. Kate's heart leaped when she saw they were human, the first of her own people she had seen since her capture. One of them, a tall woman with commander's insignia, stepped forward. Her eyes widened when she saw Kate. "Who is this?" the commander asked Krathok, her voice hard with suspicion. "Her name is Kate Morrison," Krathok replied in his accented English. "She is an engineer from the colony ship Defiance and has been under my protection. She is why I am willing to offer these terms." The commander looked at Kate with new interest. Morrison, we have you listed as dead. Everyone from the Defiance was presumed killed in the attack. I survived, Kate said simply, and I've spent the last 5 weeks in the Draxian camp. She could see the questions in the commander's eyes, the suspicion about why she was still alive and apparently unharmed. But Kate did not have time to explain her complicated situation. Commander, the Warchief is offering to release all civilian prisoners and guarantee safe evacuation for any civilians currently in Bunker 7. He's also willing to allow medical supplies to be distributed to the wounded on both sides. In exchange, the military defenders must surrender and become prisoners of war. The commander looked at Krathok. Why would you offer these terms? You have us nearly beaten. You could take the fortress by force within days. Krathok was quiet for a moment before responding. Because this human taught me that there are different kinds of strength and that honor demands protection of those who cannot fight. I do not wish to kill your civilians. They are not warriors. There is no glory in their deaths. The commander studied him, clearly trying to determine if this was some kind of trick. Finally, she spoke. I need to discuss this with my officers. Give me until morning to respond. You have until dawn, Krathok agreed. They returned to the Draxian camp and Kate was placed back in her tent, still under guard. She lay awake most of the night, wondering what the human defenders would decide and whether Krathok would truly keep his word if they agreed. Morning came, and with it, the commander's response. Bunker 7 would accept the terms. The civilians would evacuate over the next 2 days, and the military defenders would surrender their weapons once all civilians were safely away. In return, Krathok vowed that all prisoners would be treated according to the Draxian honor code and not harmed. Kate watched as the evacuation began. Long lines of humans, families with children, elderly people, injured refugees from other fallen settlements, all walking out of Bunker 7 under the watchful eyes of Draxian warriors. True to his word, Krathok had ordered his forces to allow them passage without interference. Supply trucks were provided to carry those who could not walk. Kate saw children clutching toys and parents carrying sleeping babies. She saw old men and women who had probably survived the journey from Earth, only to find themselves caught in another war. She saw fear in their faces, but also hope that they might live to see another day. Knowing that she had helped save these lives, even at the cost of her own freedom, gave Kate a sense of peace she had not felt in weeks. On the second day of evacuation, Krathok found Kate watching the refugees depart. He stood beside her in silence for a while before speaking. You did well, human Kate. Your choice saved many lives today, both your people and mine. Fewer of your warriors will die taking an empty fortress, Kate observed. Yes, Krathok agreed, and that too has value. Every warrior who lives is a son or daughter who returns home to their family. War is necessary for survival, but death is not something to celebrate. Kate turned to look at him. If you truly believe that, then why continue this war? Why not seek peace with humanity? Krathok's expression grew troubled. It is not my choice alone to make. I am only one warchief among many. The High Command directs the war and they do not ask for my opinion on strategy. They see humans as competition for resources we desperately need. What if there was another way? Kate asked. What if humans and Draxians could share resources instead of fighting over them? The Warchief looked at her with his golden-flecked eyes, and for a moment she saw a deep weariness there. I have thought the same thing in my quiet moments, but I do not know how to make the High Command listen. They see only enemies and solutions through violence. Then maybe we need to show them a different path, Kate said.
You protected me when you could have killed me.
You honored your vow even when I betrayed you. You showed mercy to civilians when you could have conquered by force. These actions prove that there is another way. Krathok was silent, considering her words. Finally he spoke. Perhaps you are right. But change comes slowly to my people, and we do not have the luxury of time. The threat that drove us from our home world still pursues us. We need new worlds quickly, or our people will have nowhere to go. It was the first time Krathok had spoken in detail about what his people were fleeing from. Kate filed that information away, sensing it was important. Tell me about this threat, she said. Maybe if I understood what you're running from, I could help find a solution. But before Krathok could respond, alarms began blaring through the camp and warriors rushed to their positions, shouting in their language. Something was wrong. Something was coming. The sky above the camp began to darken despite it being midday. Kate looked up and saw something that made her blood run cold. Ships were descending through the atmosphere, but they were unlike anything human or Draxian. They were organic-looking, with surfaces that seemed to pulse and writhe like living tissue. There were dozens of them, moving in patterns that suggested intelligent coordination. Krathok grabbed Kate's arm and pulled her toward his tent. "Inside now," he commanded. "Do not come out no matter what you hear." "What are those ships?" Kate asked as they ran. "Gelcor," Krathok said, and she heard genuine fear in his voice for the first time. "The enemy I told you about. The reason my people fled our homeworlds. They have found us here." He pushed Kate into his tent and sealed the entrance behind her. Through the leather walls, she could hear the chaos of the camp preparing for battle. Warriors shouted orders, weapons were distributed, and the heavy sound of artillery being moved into position rumbled through the ground. Then the attack began. Kate heard sounds unlike anything in her experience, a high-pitched shrieking that seemed to bypass her ears and strike directly into her brain. She covered her ears, but it did not help. Through gaps in the tent walls, she saw flashes of unnatural green light and heard the roar of explosions. The battle raged for what felt like hours. Kate huddled in the corner of the tent, trying not to imagine what was happening outside. She heard screams, both Draxian and something else. Something that sounded wrong on a fundamental level. She smelled burning and something chemical that made her gag. Eventually, the sounds of battle began to fade. The shrieking stopped and the explosions became less frequent. Kate waited, barely breathing, until the tent flap opened and Krathok entered. He was covered in a substance that looked like black oil, and one of his arms hung uselessly at his side. Behind him, she could see smoke rising from parts of the camp. "Are you injured?" he asked, his voice rough with exhaustion. "No," Kate replied. "What happened? Did you drive them off?" Krathok sat heavily on the ground. "For now. They were a scouting force testing our defenses. They will return with greater numbers. They always do." Kate moved closer to examine his injured arm. The armor plate had been melted through by something and the flesh beneath was burned. She had no medical supplies, but she tore strips from her shirt to bandage the wound as best she could. "Tell me about the Gelcor," she said as she worked. "Everything you know." Krathok winced as she tied the bandage but did not pull away. "They are a species unlike any other we have encountered. They do not communicate, they do not negotiate. They consume entire worlds, stripping them of all life and resources before moving on. My people encountered them 5 years ago when they attacked our outer colonies. We tried to fight, but their technology is far beyond ours. They use biological weapons, things that turn living beings into more of themselves. By the time we understood the threat, we had already lost 3 worlds. He paused, his 4 eyes distant with memory. The Draxian High Command made the decision to flee. We gathered what remained of our people and began searching for new worlds to settle. But the Gelcor followed. They hunt us across the stars like prey. Every world we try to claim, they eventually find. Karvoth Prime was supposed to be far enough away that they would not locate us for years. We did not expect them to arrive so soon. Kate finished bandaging his arm and sat back. "How did they find you here?" "Unknown. Perhaps they detected our ships. Perhaps they have scouts we cannot see. It does not matter. What matters is they have found us, and they will not stop until this world is consumed like all the others." Kate thought about the implications of what Krathok was telling her. The Draxians had not invaded human colonies out of cruelty or conquest. They had been desperate refugees fleeing an extinction-level threat. And now that threat had followed them here, to a world that humans also called home. "The people in Bunker 7, Kate said suddenly. "The civilians you let evacuate. Where did they go?" Krathok's expression grew grim. "They were moving toward another human settlement 40 kilometers south. If the Gelcor scouts detected them in the open..." He did not need to finish the sentence. Kate stood up, her mind already working through the problem. "We need to warn them. We need to get a message to all human forces in this region that a new threat has arrived." "And tell them what?" Krathok asked. "That the aliens they are at war with have brought an even worse enemy to their world?" "Why would they believe us?" "Because I'll tell them," Kate said. "I'm human. They'll listen to me." Krathok studied her for a long moment. "If I allow you to send this message, my high command will see it as treason. They will order my execution for revealing our weakness to the enemy." "Then don't tell them," Kate replied. "Send the message secretly. Or better yet, let me go. Give me a communication device and I'll take the message to the human forces myself." Krathok laughed. though there was no humor in it. You would come back? Kate met his four-eyed gaze directly. I gave you my word that I would help you truthfully. That vow did not come with conditions about what kind of help. Right now, the best way I can help is to make sure humans and Draxians stop killing each other and start preparing for the real enemy. The Warchief was quiet for a long time. Outside the tent, Kate could hear the sounds of the camp recovering from the attack, warriors calling out to check on their wounded, fires being extinguished, damage being assessed. Finally, Krathok made his decision. I will arrange a meeting, he said, between myself and the commander of the human forces in this region. You will be there to speak for both sides, but this must be done in secret. If either High Command discovers what we are doing before we can prove the Zelkor threat is real, we will both be executed as traitors. Over the next 3 days, while the camp recovered and rebuilt, Krathok sent secret messages to the human commander at Bunker 7, the woman Kate had met during the evacuation. Her name was Lisa Hayes, and she had been fighting the Draxians for 2 years. She was, understandably, suspicious of the request for a secret meeting. Kate recorded a personal message explaining what she had witnessed and begging Hayes to at least listen to what Krathok had to say. She did not know if it would be enough to convince the commander, but it was all she could offer. The meeting was arranged for a neutral location, an abandoned mining facility halfway between the Draxian camp and the human settlement. Krathok would bring only 2 guards, and Hayes would do the same. Kate would be there to facilitate communication and act as proof that the offer was genuine. The night before the meeting, Vrek came to Kate's tent. The female warrior had been injured in the battle with the Zelkor, a long cut across her shoulder, but she had refused to rest until her duties were complete. She sat with Kate in comfortable silence, then spoke in halting English. You are brave, Vrek said, the words clearly practiced. Like warrior, but different. Krathok is right to trust you. Kate was surprised and touched by the words. Over the weeks, Vrek had become something like a friend, or at least an ally in a world where Kate had few of either. Thank you, Kate replied. You are brave too. I saw you fighting the Zelkor. You did not run even when others did. Vrek made a clicking sound that might have been embarrassment or pride. Warriors do not run. We protect. Is our way. Maybe humans and Draxians are not so different after all, Kate said. Vrek looked at her with her 4 eyes and nodded slowly. Maybe, she agreed. The meeting was scheduled for dawn. Kate barely slept that night, running through all the possible ways the meeting could go wrong. Hayes might refuse to believe the Zelkor threat was real. She might think it was a trick to lower human defenses. She might simply be too angry about the war to consider any alliance with the Draxians. Or worse, she might agree to the meeting only to use it as an opportunity to capture or kill Krathok. But when dawn came, and Kate stood in the abandoned mining facility with Krathok and his 2 guards, watching Commander Hayes approach with her own escort, she felt a strange calm settle over her. This was what needed to happen. This was the only way forward that did not end with both species being destroyed by the Zelkor. All she could do was speak the truth and hope it was enough. Hayes entered the facility and stopped several meters away, her hand near her weapon. She looked at Kate first, studying her for a long moment, then turned her attention to Krathok. The Warchief stood straight despite his injured arm, every inch the warrior leader, but Kate could sense the tension in him. This was as dangerous for him as it was for the humans. I'm here, Hayes said flatly. Talk. Kate stepped forward, positioning herself between the 2 commanders. Thank you for coming, Commander. What I'm about to tell you is going to be hard to believe, but I swear on my life that every word is true. The Draxians are not invading human colonies for conquest or resources. She took a deep breath and continued. They're running from something worse. Commander Hayes listened to Kate's explanation in silence, her expression growing darker with each word. When Kate finished describing the Zelkor attack on the Draxian camp 3 days earlier, Hayes shook her head. This is convenient, she said coldly. Very convenient. You expect me to believe that the aliens who destroyed our colonies and killed thousands of our people are actually victims themselves? That we should just forget about the war and join forces against some mysterious new enemy? I expect you to look at the evidence, Kate replied. She pulled out a data pad that Krathok had given her, one containing recordings and sensor data from the Zelkor attack. These are readings from 3 days ago. Compare them to any database of known technology, human or Draxian. You'll see this is something entirely different. Hayes took the datapad reluctantly and studied it. Kate watched her face carefully, seeing the moment when professional curiosity overcame suspicion. The commander's eyes widened slightly as she reviewed the information. These energy signatures, Hayes said slowly. I've never seen anything like this. The organic components, the biological integration with technology. If this is real. It's real, Krathok spoke for the first time, his deep voice echoing in the empty facility. The gel core destroyed 3 of our worlds before we fled. They killed billions of my people. We came to this sector of space because we believed we would be safe here, far from their hunting grounds. We were wrong. Hayes looked up from the datapad, studying the Warchief with new eyes. Why should I trust you? For all I know, this could be an elaborate deception. You attack us with conventional weapons, then show us these recordings of some other threat, convince us to lower our defenses, and then finish us off. It was Krathok's turn to show frustration. He clicked his mandibles together sharply. If I wanted to destroy your settlements, I would not need deception. My forces outnumber yours 5-1 in this region. I could crush your remaining strongholds within weeks. I am here because I understand that neither of our species will survive if the gel core fully commit to conquering this world. They do not take prisoners. They do not negotiate. They consume everything. The meeting was turning tense, and Kate could see it spiraling toward another argument. She stepped forward again. Commander Hayes, I understand your doubt. I felt the same way when Krathok first told me about the gel core. But I was there during the attack. I saw those ships. I heard the sounds they made. This is not a trick or a deception. This is a threat that will destroy humans and Draxians equally if we do not work together. Hayes was silent for a long moment, her jaw tight. Finally, she spoke. Even if I believe you, even if this threat is real, I can't just order my people to stop fighting the Draxians and ally with them. I don't have that authority. The colonial government would never approve it. Then we must make them understand, Krathok said. Show them the evidence. Tell them what is coming. Or, he paused, clearly struggling with what he was about to say. Or wait until the gel core attack a human settlement. When your people see the threat with their own eyes, they will understand why we must unite. You're suggesting we wait for more people to die? Hayes asked, anger creeping into her voice. I am suggesting that sometimes people will not accept truth until they see it themselves. Krathok replied. I do not like this answer any more than you do. But I know my own high command. They will not authorize peace with humanity based on the word of one Warchief. They will need proof that the gel core are here and that they threaten us both. Kate felt sick at the thought of waiting for another attack, but she could see the logic in Krathok's words. Convincing 2 entire species to stop fighting and work together would require more than sensor data and testimony. It would require something undeniable. Then we prepare, Kate said. Both sides start making plans for joint defense quietly without official approval. When the gel core attack again, we're ready to respond together. We show both our peoples that cooperation is not just possible but necessary for survival. Hayes and Krathok both looked at her. She could see them considering the proposal, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. How would this work? Hayes asked finally. Our technology is different, our tactics are different. We've been enemies for 2 years. You can't just snap your fingers and make that go away. No, Kate agreed. But you can start small. Share intelligence about the gel core, coordinate early warning systems, plan response protocols, and most importantly, stop shooting at each other long enough to focus on the real enemy. Krathok nodded slowly. I can order my forces to maintain defensive positions only. No new offensives against human settlements. If your people do the same, it will create space for preparation. Hayes ran a hand through her hair, clearly torn. Kate understood the weight of the decision she was being asked to make. If this was a trick, Hayes would be responsible for leaving her people vulnerable. But if it was real and she did nothing, the consequences could be far worse. I need time, Hayes said finally. I need to discuss this with my senior staff and present the evidence to the Colonial Council. Give me 3 days. You have 2, Krathok replied. The gel core scouts we drove off will report back to their main force. They will return soon, and when they do, they will bring enough ships to overwhelm this entire region. Both our species will need every hour we can get to prepare. Hayes nodded grimly and turned to leave, but Kate called after her. Commander, one more thing. The civilians you evacuated from Bunker 7. Where are they now? Hayes turned back, her expression softening slightly. Safe, relatively speaking. We moved them to an underground facility that used to be a mining complex. It's well hidden and heavily shielded. Why? Because when the Gelcor come back, those people will need protection, Kate said. And they'll need it from both Draxians and humans working together. If we can show your Colonial Council and Krathok's High Command that we successfully defended civilians through cooperation, it might be the proof they need. Hayes considered this for a moment, then nodded. Send me the communication frequencies for your command structure. If something happens, I'll need to reach you quickly. After Hayes left, Krathok stood silent for a long time, staring at the place where the human commander had been. Finally, he spoke. I have committed treason today. If the High Command learns of this meeting, I will be executed. I know, Kate said quietly. I've committed treason too. The colonial government will not look kindly on me helping the enemy and advocating for peace. Krathok looked at her with his golden-flecked eyes, and something that might have been respect showed on his face. We are both traitors now, but perhaps traitors are what our peoples need. The 2 days passed slowly. Kate worked with Krathok and his senior warriors to develop emergency response plans for the next Gelcor attack. She taught them about human tactics and weapons, information that would have gotten her executed as a traitor under normal circumstances. But these were not normal circumstances, and desperate times called for desperate measures. Breck proved invaluable in these planning sessions. Despite her limited English, she understood tactical thinking and could communicate complex ideas through gestures and diagrams. Kate found herself growing to respect the female warrior more with each passing day. There was an intelligence and adaptability in Rek that reminded Kate of her fellow engineers back home. On the morning of the 3rd day, a message came from Hayes. She had presented the evidence to her senior staff, and while there was significant resistance, she had managed to convince them to at least prepare contingency plans for cooperation with the Draxians. The Colonial Council was still debating the issue, but Hayes was not waiting for their decision. She was taking matters into her own hands. That evening, as Kate was reviewing defensive positions with Krathok and his commanders, the alarms began to sound. Not the camp alarms this time, but the long-range sensors that had been set up after the first attack. The Gelcor were returning, and they had brought significantly more ships than before. Krathok immediately sent the signal to Hayes as they had arranged. Within minutes, she responded. Human forces were detecting the same incoming ships. The Colonial Council's debates were over. The Gelcor had made the decision for them. Kate stood in the command center watching the sensor displays as dozens, then hundreds of Gelcor ships entered the planet's atmosphere. They were spreading out across the region, attacking multiple targets simultaneously. Both human and Draxian settlements were being hit. The Gelcor were not discriminating. They were attacking everything that moved. One cluster of ships was heading directly for the underground facility where the evacuated civilians were hiding. Kate's heart sank as she realized the Gelcor must have detected the life signs somehow. Hundreds of innocent people, human families with children, were about to be caught in the attack. She turned to Krathok. We need to defend that facility. Those are the civilians you vowed to protect. Krathok was already moving, barking orders to his warriors. But Kate could see the problem. The facility was too far away. By the time Draxian forces arrived, the attack would be over. Then Hayes' voice came through the communication channel, urgent and determined. We have forces near the mining facility, but not enough to hold off an attack of this size. We need support. This was it. Kate insisted on going with the Draxian forces to the mining facility. Krathok initially refused, but she argued that someone needed to be there who could communicate with both species in the chaos of battle. Finally, he relented and allowed her to ride in his command vehicle alongside Rek and 2 other senior warriors. The journey took 18 minutes of hard driving across rough terrain. Through the vehicle's windows, Kate could see the sky lit up with green fire as Gelcor ships attacked targets across the region. The organic ships moved with an unnatural fluidity, like schools of predatory fish hunting prey. She forced herself to look away and focus on the task ahead. When they arrived at the mining facility, they found the human forces already engaged with the Gelcor. A dozen of the organic ships hovered above the facility entrance, firing down with weapons that released clouds of something that looked like spores. Human soldiers were fighting from defensive positions, their conventional weapons doing minimal damage to the Gelcor ships. The Draxian vehicles roared into position and warriors poured out, taking up positions alongside the humans without hesitation. For a moment, both groups of soldiers stared at each other in shock, old enemies suddenly standing side by side. Then one of the human sergeants shouted an order and the moment passed. They had a common enemy now and no time for old hatreds. Krathok coordinated the defense with Hayes through Kate's translation. The Draxian heavy weapons were more effective against the Gelcor ships than human firearms, but the humans had better tactical positioning and knowledge of the facility's layout. Together they created a defensive perimeter that was stronger than either could have managed alone. The battle was brutal. The Gelcor spores proved to be a biological weapon that infected any living tissue it touched, causing rapid cellular breakdown. Several warriors and soldiers fell to it before Kate realized what she was seeing, and shouted for everyone to seal their armor and respirators. The Gelcor ships themselves were incredibly durable, shrugging off hits that would have destroyed conventional craft. But slowly, through coordinated fire and tactical adaptation, the combined human Draxian force began to push back. When a Gelcor ship focused its attack on one position, the other species would flank and hit it from the side. When the spore clouds descended, warriors with sealed armor would hold the line while humans in lighter gear fell back to protected positions. They were learning to fight as a unified force, and it was working. After 2 hours of continuous combat, the Gelcor ships began to withdraw. They had not been defeated, but they had failed to penetrate the facility's defenses, and the cost of continuing the attack was too high. The organic ships pulled back and disappeared into the upper atmosphere, leaving behind a battlefield covered in their dead and wounded. Kate stood in the aftermath, looking at humans and Draxians helping each other with wounds, sharing supplies and working together to secure the perimeter. A human medic was treating a Draxian warrior's injuries while a Draxian engineer showed a human soldier how to repair damaged armor plating. The scene would have been unthinkable just days ago. Commander Hayes approached, her armor scorched and her face exhausted but alive. She looked at Krathok, who stood nearby with his injured arm freshly bandaged. "Your warriors fought well," Hayes said simply. "They saved a lot of lives today." "Human lives," Krathok nodded. "Your soldiers fought with honor. They stood their ground when many would have fled. This is what we can accomplish together." Hayes was quiet for a moment, then extended her hand in the human gesture of respect and agreement. Krathok looked at the hand, clearly unfamiliar with the gesture. Kate quickly explained it to him. The Warchief reached out with his good arm and grasped Hayes' hand carefully, mindful of his strength. "We should formalize this cooperation," Hayes said, "before our respective commands can order us to stop. Present them with a working alliance as fact rather than proposal." "Agreed," Krathok replied. "Kate Morrison will serve as liaison between our forces. She has earned the trust of both our peoples." Kate felt the weight of that responsibility settle on her shoulders, but she accepted it without hesitation. This was what she had been working toward, a bridge between two species who had been enemies but could become something more. Over the following weeks, the cooperation between humans and Draxians grew from necessity into something resembling genuine alliance. The Gelcor attacked 3 more times, each assault larger than the last, and each time the combined forces held them off with increasing effectiveness. Word spread through both militaries about the success of the joint operations, and resistance to the alliance began to crumble. Kate worked tirelessly as liaison, solving problems both technical and cultural. She taught human engineers how to integrate Draxian technology into their systems, and showed Draxian warriors how to adapt human tactical flexibility. She mediated disputes and translated not just language but intention and meaning between 2 very different cultures. Rek became Kate's primary partner in this work. The female warrior had a gift for understanding people regardless of species, and she helped Kate navigate the complex politics of both commands. Together, they formed a team that represented the best of what cooperation could achieve. The breakthrough came 6 weeks after that first joint battle at the mining facility. Kate was working on a project she had been developing in secret, a new type of shield technology that combined human adaptive algorithms with Draxian power systems. The result was a defensive field that could adapt in real time to counter the Gelcor's biological weapons. She presented the prototype to Krathok and Hayes together, demonstrating how it could protect both species from the spore attacks that had proven so devastating. The 2 commanders immediately saw the implications. This was technology that neither species could have developed alone, proof that cooperation was not just about survival, but about advancement. Hayes took the prototype data to the Colonial Council, while Krathok sent it to the Draxian High Command. Both presented it the same way. This is what we can achieve together that we cannot achieve apart. The Gelcor are here and they will not stop until one side wins. We can either fight them separately and die, or fight them together and have a chance at survival. 3 days later, both governments reluctantly approved a formal military alliance. There were conditions and restrictions. Trust did not come easily after years of war, but it was a start. Human and Draxian forces would operate under a unified command structure for the purpose of defending against the Gelcor threat. Kate was appointed as Chief Technical Liaison, a position that made her officially responsible for technology sharing and integration between the species. The first joint fleet launched 2 months after Kate had been chained to Krathok's fence as a cruel joke. She stood in the command center watching the ships lift off, human and Draxian vessels flying in formation. It was a powerful sight, one that represented hope in a way Kate had not felt since before the war began. Krathok stood beside her, his injured arm now fully healed. He had been promoted to Supreme Commander of Draxian forces in the sector, a recognition of his leadership during the crisis. Hayes had received a similar promotion on the human side. The two commanders who had been enemies were now partners in defending their shared world. How does it feel to know your betrayal saved both our peoples? Krathok asked Kate, a hint of humor in his voice. Kate smiled. I'm not sure betrayal is the right word anymore. I stayed loyal to what I believed was right, and it turned out that what was right for me was also right for everyone else. You have come far from the frightened human chained to my fence, Krathok observed. And you've come far from the Warchief who was supposed to execute me at dawn, Kate replied. We both changed. Maybe that's what this has all been about. Change. Breck approached them carrying a data pad with the latest reports from the joint fleet. She had been promoted to Kate's assistant and had learned enough English to communicate effectively. She handed the pad to Kate and made a clicking sound that Kate had learned meant satisfaction. Fleet operating at 97% efficiency, Breck reported. Better than projections. Humans and Draxians working well together. Kate reviewed the data and nodded. This is good. This is really good. At this rate, we might actually have a chance when the main Gelcor force arrives, because they all knew it was coming. The scouts and advanced ships they had been fighting were just the beginning. Somewhere out in deep space, a full Gelcor invasion fleet was making its way toward Karvoth Prime. When it arrived, the real war would begin. But now, for the first time, humans and Draxians would face that threat together. They had resources, technology, and tactics that neither could have achieved alone. They had soldiers who had learned to trust each other through shared combat. They had leaders who understood that cooperation was the only path to survival. Kate thought about the journey that had brought her here. From engineer on a doomed colony ship to prisoner chained to a fence to the architect of an alliance between species. It was not a path she would have chosen, but looking at the joint fleet on the display screens, she could not regret where it had led. Krathok had kept his vow. She had never gone back to being a prisoner or victim. Instead, she had become something neither of them could have imagined that cold morning.